I used to use it regularly to go and see the matches that I was interested in on Court 1. I won't go there now. I won't go anywhere near.
For decades, people asked the same quiet question about Cliff Richard. Why did he step back? Why did the man who once filled Wembley Stadium, who dominated charts for generations, slowly fade from the public spotlight when he still had everything going for him? The easy answer was age. The convenient answer was changing times. But the truth sat much deeper and far more painfully than anyone realized. Cliff Richard did not disappear because the world stopped loving him. He stepped away because loving the world cost him almost everything. He was born Harry Roger Webb on October 14, 1940, in Lucknow, British India, during a moment when the world itself felt unstable. World War II raged on, and India was inching closer to independence. His early childhood unfolded under heat, servants, and colonial structure, but that world collapsed quickly. By 1948, riots had broken out, the British Empire was unraveling, and families like the Webbs were forced to leave behind everything they knew. They didn't fly out. They escaped on a crowded ship, the SS Franconia, packed with hundreds of displaced families crossing the Indian Ocean toward an England they barely recognized anymore. The transition was brutal. India's warmth vanished into England's gray skies, rationing and post-war exhaustion. The families settled into a small house in Surrey, a far cry from their previous life. For young Harry, the move planted something powerful inside him, a hunger to prove himself, to become more than a boy who had lost his home twice over. Somewhere along that journey, Harry Webb disappeared, and Cliff Richard was born. A manager told him he needed a name that sounded strong, modern, and rebellious. Cliff, steady and British. Richard, a nod to Little Richard's wild American energy. It wasn't just a stage name. It was a rebirth. And in 1958, everything changed. When Move It was released, Britain wasn't ready. The song was raw, loud, and unapologetic. Cliff was only 18, but he sounded like something entirely new. The track shot to number 2 on the UK charts and detonated like a cultural bomb. For the first time, British teenagers didn't need American rock stars. They had their own, before the Beatles, before the Stones. Cliff Richard cracked the door open. What followed was chaos. Concerts turned into hysteria. Girls screamed, cried, fainted. Security struggled to hold back crowds. Newspapers called it Cliff Fever. It looked like Elvis-level madness, except it was happening in London, Manchester, Leeds. Britain had never seen anything like it, and the hits kept coming. Living Doll, a song Cliff initially hated for being too soft, went to number 1 for 6 weeks and sold hundreds of thousands of copies. Travelin' Light followed. Then films. Serious ones. In Serious Charge, Cliff tackled themes like false accusations and homosexuality at just 19, shocking critics who expected a harmless teen idol. With Espresso Bongo and later Summer Holiday, he proved he wasn't just writing fame. He was shaping it. By 1963, Summer Holiday wasn't just a movie. It was a national event. Leicester Square flooded with fans. The soundtrack topped the album charts for 14 weeks. Songs from the film dominated radio. Cliff was voted Britain's favorite movie star. Then the Beatles arrived and everyone assumed his reign was over. It wasn't. In 1964, at the height of Beatlemania, Cliff placed more songs in the UK top 10 than the Beatles themselves. Even John Lennon admitted that before Cliff Richard, there was nothing worth listening to in England. A global poll by New Musical Express crowned Cliff the world's best male singer, beating Elvis, Lennon, and McCartney. He had done the impossible. He survived the revolution he helped start. But behind the scenes, Cliff was wrestling with something far heavier than charts and competition. In 1966, he stunned the nation by publicly declaring his Christian faith alongside evangelist Billy Graham at Earl's Court. Rock stars weren't supposed to talk about God. They were supposed to rebel, not confess. The industry panicked. Fans feared he would quit music altogether. Agents pulled back. Rumors spread. Instead, Cliff did something unprecedented. He stayed. He kept singing. And he lived openly by his faith. He became the first major British pop star to do both without apology. That choice cost him fans. But it gave him something else, peace. He later admitted that before his faith, his confidence was an act. Afterward, he felt free to be himself. Even so, his career wasn't immune to decline. By the mid-1970s, his chart presence faded. For the first time, people whispered that Cliff Richard was finished. Then Devil Woman arrived in 1976 and roared into the UK and US top 10. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a reinvention. Cliff was no longer a relic. He was a serious rock artist again. The late 1980s brought another surge. Always Guaranteed went platinum. Mistletoe and Wine dominated Christmas charts and became the UK's best-selling single of 1988. At Wembley Stadium in 1989, Cliff didn't just perform. He curated history, blending nostalgia with relevance in a concert that felt like a living archive of British music. But beneath all that success lived a silence few understood. Cliff Richard never married. He never had children. For decades, fans speculated, gossiped, and assumed. The truth was far more tragic. Cliff loved one woman for nearly 50 years. She married his best friend instead. Later, she married someone else. Eventually, she died in his arms. He carried that heartbreak quietly, choosing loyalty over bitterness, solitude over replacement. He kept singing, but he never replaced what he lost. Then came 2014. When police raided his home, broadcasting it live through a secret agreement between South Yorkshire Police and the BBC, Cliff wasn't even in the country. He turned on the television in Portugal and watched helicopters circle his house like a crime drama. The accusations were false. The damage was permanent. He lost weight, developed shingles, couldn't sleep. He said his home felt defiled. A man who once commanded stadiums became afraid to leave his house. Though the investigation ended with no charges, the media spectacle followed him everywhere. It wasn't justice, it was humiliation. Cliff eventually won his lawsuit against the BBC in 2018. The court ruled that his privacy had been grossly violated. The decision changed how British media handled police investigations. But for Cliff, no ruling could give back what was taken. 2 years of fear, a lifetime reputation bruised by suspicion. And so he stepped back. Not because he had nothing left to give, but because he had already given everything. Cliff Richard didn't vanish. He withdrew to survive. Behind the polished smile was a man shaped by displacement, faith, heartbreak, and betrayal. The spotlight didn't fade him. It burned him. And when he finally stepped away, it wasn't defeat. It was dignity. Sometimes the loudest exits are the quiet ones.